What if everything we think we know about truth? What if it's all based on, like, a fundamental misconception?
It's a big question. Really stops you in your tracks.
Right. And that's exactly what we're tackling today on the deep dive. We're plunging headfirst into this intense intellectual showdown. Think of it like a philosophical heavyweight match between two brilliant minds, both grappling with this ultimate question: is there a mind-independent truth? You know, a truth that exists completely outside our heads. And if there is, can we ever actually get to it?
Classic, maybe the classic philosophical problem.
And we're really thrilled to explore this because we're diving into a set of arguments and counter-arguments sent in by one of you, our listeners, which is fantastic.
Yes, it's great source material. Very well structured.
It really is. It's like getting front row seats to a live debate. Now, our mission here isn't to pick a winner, to say who's right or wrong.
No, definitely not.
We want to be your guides. We're here to help you unpack the complex reasoning, really understand what's at stake, and the stakes are pretty high, and just appreciate the surprising twists in this discussion.
Our job is to map out the terrain, basically. Make it as clear as possible.
Exactly. Give you the clearest possible map of this challenging intellectual landscape. So how are we going to do that? We've broken it down into 3 rounds, following the flow of the debate itself.
Makes sense.
First, we'll lay out the initial argument. This powerful assertion that our whole quest for objective, mind-independent truth might be flawed, that such truth could be inaccessible and, maybe surprisingly, even useless to us.
A controversial starting point, for sure.
Then, round 2. The counter-arguments. This is where the second writer comes in with a real rebellion, trying to dismantle that first argument.
The pushback.
And finally, round 3. We circle back to the first writer, who meticulously refutes those counter-arguments piece by piece. It's a real demolition job, or at least it aims to be.
Argument, counter-argument, refutation. A classic structure.
All right, let's unpack this. Ready to dive in?
Let's do it. So we start with this pretty bold proposition that humanity's long search, millennia really, for an objective, unchanging truth that exists totally separate from our minds, that this whole quest might be built on a flawed assumption.
Okay. And the first writer isn't saying nothing is true, right? This isn't nihilism.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
They're quite clear about that. It's framed more as a philosophical realignment, a necessary one. It's about reevaluating what truth can realistically mean for creatures like us with the minds we have.
Got it. So where does this realignment start?
It starts by establishing what the writer calls the perceptual veil. Or you could think of it as the imprisonment of consciousness, in a way.
The imprisonment sounds dramatic.
It is, in a philosophical sense. The core idea is actually quite simple, almost obvious when you think about it. Our experience of reality isn't direct. It's mediated. Always.
Mediated, meaning filtered somehow.
Exactly. Think about how you access the world. Anything at all. Every single piece of information, every sensation, it all comes through a very specific set of tools.
My senses, presumably? Sight, sound, touch?
Right. Your senses, your ability to reason, your memory, your emotions, even the language you use to think and categorize things. That's the first premise. P1, if you like. Humans only access reality through these perceptual and cognitive faculties.
And the argument is there's just no other way, no secret back door to reality.
Precisely. As far as we know, empirically, rationally, there's no other known channel. Everything you've ever known, from the feeling of warmth to, the concept of justice, came to these systems.
Okay, that seems straightforward enough. We use our minds and senses to know things. What's the catch?
The catch comes with the second premise, P2. All perceptual and cognitive faculties are filtered, translated, and structured by the mind. This is the critical step.
So they're not just clear windows.
Not at all. The argument is they aren't passive receivers like a security camera just recording. They're active processors. Sophisticated ones. They don't just take data in, they interpret it, they shape it, they structure it. They arguably even create our experience in a significant way.
Create it? How so?
Well, the writer uses this analogy. The mind is like a powerful graphics processor rendering a coherent user interface. Without it, the raw data from the universe might just be noise, completely incomprehensible. The mind actively builds the structured world we perceive from that data.
Okay, that's a strong claim. Can you give an example of this rendering in action, where it's clear our mind isn't just receiving?
Sure. The classic example is the illusion of color. Take a red apple.
Okay, looks pretty red to me. Seems inherent to the apple.
Right. But is it? The apple's surface just has a physical property. It absorbs certain wavelengths of light and reflects others. Specifically, those around 650 nanometers in this case. Red isn't in the apple. Red is the subjective experience your brain constructs when your photoreceptors detect that specific wavelength and your visual cortex processes that signal. It's entirely a mind-dependent qualia and experience.
So if I were, say, a bee seeing in ultraviolet.
Exactly. The apple would look completely different, maybe colors we can't even conceive of. Or think of someone with red-green color blindness. To them, that same apple might look brownish or yellowish.
So who's seeing the true color?
According to this argument, that question is meaningless. Each experience the human's read, the bee's UV pattern, the colorblind person's perception, is a valid construction within its own cognitive system. The redness only exists inside a mind capable of constructing it. It's rendered, not discovered.
Interesting. So it's not just about limitations, it's about active construction. What about other things, like objects?
Good question. The argument extends there, too. Think about a chair.
Okay, I see a chair, wood, legs, back. Seems pretty real.
But you don't perceive, say, a swarm of agitated atoms in a particular configuration, or just disjointed patches of color and texture. Your mind instantly, effortlessly, bundles all that sensory input into a unified concept, chair.
Right, it's automatic.
It's an incredibly powerful cognitive filter. You apply a label chair, you assign a function for sitting, you bring in all sorts of learned associations. This act of imposing objecthood, of carving up the continuous flow of sensory data into discrete things, is presented as a fundamental function of the mind, not something inherent in the raw data stream of reality itself. We can't easily not see the chair.
Wow. Okay, so if all our access is through faculties and all faculties are filters or constructors?
Then the conclusion, C, follows logically. Humans can only access reality as it is filtered by the mind, not as it is in itself. We're always operating within that user interface our mind generates.
This sounds a bit like Kant, the phenomenon versus the noumenon.
Exactly. The argument explicitly draws that parallel. The noumenal world is reality as it is in itself, independent of any observer. The phenomenal world is the reality we experience, the one shaped by our cognitive filters. And this first writer is arguing pretty forcefully that we are permanently confined to the phenomenal.
We can't peek behind the curtain, basically.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Logically, if A, access to reality, requires F faculties, and F always involves M, mental filtering, then A always involves M. A implies M, access implies filtering.
Okay, so we're trapped in the phenomenal world according to this argument. If that's true, what does it do to the whole idea of truth, especially objective truth?
Ah, yes, that's the next major step. If we accept the perceptual veil, the implications for truth are, well, profound. This is where the argument really starts to bite.
I'm ready. Hit me.
Okay, this brings us to the second key part of the argument, the unattainable ideal of mind-independent truth. First, we need to be clear on the definition being used. P1, define mind-independent truth as truth that exists regardless of any observer or cognitive filter.
The truth that's out there, whether anyone's around to know it or not. The God's eye view.
Precisely. Or the view from nowhere. It's a statement about the noumenal world. Imagine that tree falling in the forest with no one around. The mind-independent truth would be the pure physics of it. Mass, velocity, air pressure waves, ground vibrations, described without any mind-dependent concepts like sound or even tree as we conceive.
Right. Concepts we impose.
Then P2. Reiterate the conclusion from the first part. Humans cannot access anything that is completely independent of cognitive filters. We're stuck in the phenomenal.
Okay, we established that.
So the conclusion, C, is stark. Humans cannot access mind-independent truth. It follows directly. If this kind of truth is defined as existing in a realm, noumenal, that is, by its nature, inaccessible to us due to our filters, then we simply cannot access it.
It seems almost tautological when you put it like that. If truth is defined as unfilterable and we can only access things filtered, then we can't access that truth.
It has that feel, doesn't it? Claiming we can know a mind-independent truth becomes a direct contradiction in terms. It's like saying you can use your eyes, a filter, to see something defined as invisible, independent of visual filters. Logically, if T, mind-independent truth, implies I, independence from filters, and our access A implies not I, dependence on filters, then A implies not T. Access implies not getting mind-independent truth.
And you mentioned quantum mechanics earlier. How does that fit in here?
It's often used as a powerful illustration. Think about Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. When you try to measure, say, an electron's position very precisely, its momentum becomes uncertain, and vice versa. The very act of observing or measuring the system inevitably disturbs it.
You can't know both perfectly at the same time because looking changes things.
Exactly. You only ever know the observed system, the system as filtered by your measurement apparatus. You can't know the unobserved, mind-independent state of the electron in that specific way. The act of access is the filtering process. So any truth you state is about the phenomenal outcome of your interaction, not some noumenal electron in itself.
That's a really compelling example from physics itself. Okay, so mind-independent truth might be inaccessible.
Yeah.
But does that really matter? Even if it exists out there, untouchable, maybe it's still important somehow.
You've anticipated the next move in the argument. It shifts from theoretical inaccessibility to practical consequence. Is this concept even useful?
Right, let's hear it.
This is the pragmatic futility of an unusable concept. Premise 1, P1. For any concept of truth to be useful communicatively, useful epistemically for building knowledge, it needs to be accessible or at least inferable by human minds.
Meaning we have to be able to do something with it. Verify it, test it, share it.
Exactly. Truth, in this pragmatic view, isn't just some abstract ideal floating in space. It's supposed to be a tool, a foundation. If I tell you something is true, but it's impossible for you or anyone else to ever check it, experience it, draw inferences from it, or connect it to anything else we know, what have I actually given you?
Not much. Just empty words, maybe.
It's a contentless assertion, as the writer puts it. A useful truth concept has to have handles, something we can grasp and work with.
Okay, makes sense. Then P2.
P2 simply restates the previous conclusion. Mind-independent truths are inaccessible and uninferable by human minds. We can't access them directly, and critically, we can't even infer them reliably. Why? Because any inference we make uses our mind-dependent logic operating on our mind-filtered data. You can't use the tools of the phenomenal world to logically deduce the precise nature of the noumenal world.
Our reasoning itself is part of the filter system.
Precisely. So the conclusion, C, follows. Therefore, the concept of mind-independent truth is communicatively and epistemically useless. It refers to something unknowable, unreachable, unverifiable. It has no practical value for beings like us.
Like the map of that country with no features and no roads.
Exactly. The map stays blank. Trying to use the concept of mind-independent truth to navigate our world, the phenomenal world, is like trying to use that blank map. It offers no guidance, no predictive power, no way to build shared understanding.
The argument uses the invisible dragon analogy here, right?
Yes, it's a classic. If I claim there's an invisible, intangible, silent, heatless, odorless, entirely undetectable dragon in this room, is that claim true? False.
It's irrelevant, meaningless.
Pretty much, because the dragon is defined in a way that puts it completely beyond any possible access or verification. The claim has zero explanatory power. It explains nothing we observe, zero predictive power, we can't use it to predict anything, and it's communicatively sterile. Beyond the initial claim, there's nothing more to say or test.
And the argument is that mind-independent truth functions just like that undetectable dragon.
That's the assertion. It's a concept that, because of its inherent inaccessibility, plays no actual role in our knowledge building or communication. It's epistemically useless, logically. If usefulness, U, requires accessibility, A, and mind-independent truth, M, implies not A, then M implies not U. Mind-independent truth is not useful.
Wow. Okay. So if the traditional idea of objective truth is inaccessible and useless, where does that leave us? Are we just floating in a sea of subjectivity?
No, and this is crucial. The argument doesn't stop at tearing down. It aims to build something up in its place. This is the final constructive part.
Good, because it was starting to feel a little bit like pulling the rug out.
Understandable. This part is called the affirmation of mind-dependent justified truth. The core idea is we're not left in a void. We just need a more, let's say, robust and honest definition of what truth means for us.
Okay. How does that work?
P1. Truths that can be accessed, justified, or inferred by human minds do have communicative and epistemic value. This flips the previous argument on its head.
So the truths we can actually work with are the ones that matter.
Precisely. Think about science. Theories based on observable evidence, making testable predictions. Mathematics. Theorems derived logically from shared axioms. History. Narratives inferred from verifiable documents and artifacts. These kinds of truths are valuable because we can access the evidence, share the reasoning, and use them to understand and predict things within our world.
That makes sense. They're functional.
Then P2. Only mind-dependent, inferentially justified truths meet this criterion. Why? because the very acts accessing, justifying, inferring are all cognitive processes. They are performed by minds using mind-dependent tools, logic, language, perception, operating on the data available to us in our phenomenal reality.
So any truth that has value must be, by definition, mind-dependent.
That's the conclusion. A justified truth, in this context, means one that fits coherently within our web of beliefs, is supported by evidence we can perceive and agree upon, and ideally has predictive power.
And the final conclusion, C.
Therefore, only mind-dependent, inferentially justified truths are epistemically and communicatively valid. This is the proposed redefinition. Valid truth isn't about perfectly mirroring some unknowable external reality. It's a quality of statements or models within our phenomenal world.
What qualities make it valid, then?
Predictive power, internal logical coherence, and justification based on shared, accessible evidence. This, the writer argues, isn't a downgrade of truth. It's the only form of truth that has ever actually mattered, or could ever matter, to beings like us. It's the truth that lets us build bridges, cure diseases, and understand our past.
So take water as H2O. The validity of that statement isn't that it perfectly matches some noumenal waterness.
Exactly. Its validity comes from its incredible power within our system. It's coherent with vast amounts of other chemical knowledge. It allows us to make incredibly accurate predictions about water's behavior. It lets us manipulate water for countless purposes. It's justified by repeatable experiments and observations accessible to all competent observers.
It works brilliantly.
It works. It's a pragmatic, powerful truth justified by mind-dependent inference and observation. It's the kind of truth we can build upon. Logically, if validity V means having justification utility J, and only mind-dependent truths, D, have J, then V requires D. Only mind-dependent truths are valid.
Okay, so summing up this first writer's whole argument. We're behind a perceptual veil, making mind-independent truth inaccessible and therefore useless. So we should ditch that concept and focus on building and refining mind-dependent truths, validated by justification, coherence, and predictive power within the only reality we know.
You've got it. It's a move away from a potentially futile metaphysical quest towards a pragmatic, epistemic project focused on the knowledge we can actually build and share.
All right, that was a comprehensive argument. It feels quite tightly reasoned. But, as promised, there's a rebellion brewing. The second writer enters the chat, and they are not impressed.
Not in the slightest. The second writer sees this whole structure as, I believe the phrase was, a philosophical house of cards.
Yeah, and a siren song of sophistry, a doctrine of despair. They're not holding back. This isn't just disagreement. It's presented as a full-on counterattack.
Absolutely. The rebellion starts immediately, aiming right at the foundation, tearing the veil, the fallacy of the universal filter.
Attacking that very first premise about our faculties being filters.
Directly. They call the phrase, all perceptual and cognitive faculties are filtered by the mind, a masterpiece of semantic poison, a gross mischaracterization.
Strong words. What's their objection to filter?
They argue filter is deliberately loaded. It implies distortion, reduction, blockage. They say a more neutral and, frankly, more accurate term would be something like interface or translator or even detector.
Okay, how does changing the word change the argument?
Well, think about the telescope analogy they use. Does a telescope filter reality in a way that deceives us about distant stars?
No, it seems to reveal more reality. It filters out unfocused light, maybe, but the goal is greater access.
Exactly. Or a microphone. It translates air pressure waves into electrical signals. It's a filter in a technical sense, but its purpose and effect is to grant us access to the reality of sound, not to invent it or block us from it. The second writer argues our senses are like that tools for detection and access, not primarily agents of distortion.
And they revisit the redness example too, right?
Oh, yes. They call the first writer's take on color profound intellectual dishonesty. The counterargument is firm. Our eyes aren't fabricating red from nothing. They are biological instruments, exquisitely tuned to detect a specific, real, mind-independent physical property, a certain wavelength of light.
So red is just our experience of that real property.
Precisely. The experience, redness, is mind-dependent, sure. But the thing it's an experience of, the light wavelength reflected by the apple, is objective, real, mind-independent. The bee seeing UV and us seeing red aren't having competing illusions. They're having different, equally valid detections of the same underlying physical reality.
So the first writer made a category error, confusing the experience with the thing experienced.
That's the accusation. mistaking the map for the territories, in essence. The core counterpoint here is powerful. Our senses aren't barriers, they're bridges. We aren't trapped by them, we're liberated through them.
And the proof is in the pudding, so to speak. The fact that we can build things that work.
Exactly. Skyscrapers that stand, planes that fly, eclipses predicted centuries in advance. How is any of this possible if our senses and reason are fundamentally disconnected from a mind-independent reality? The sheer success of science and engineering is presented as overwhelming evidence that our filters actually connect us reliably to a solid, stable, mind-independent shore.
To deny that connection seems counterintuitive, at least.
The second writer calls it pathological skepticism. It makes every human achievement seem like a bizarre coincidence rather than the result of genuine understanding and interaction with an external world.
Okay, that's a strong defense of our senses as connectors, not just filters. What about the next part of the first argument? The idea that mind-independent truth is inaccessible. The second writer had a specific logical attack there, didn't they? The self-destructing machine.
Yes, this is a key point in the counterargument. The self-destructing machine, the incoherence of inaccessible truth. It targets the core claim. Humans cannot access mind-independent truth.
And the killer question
is that statement itself supposed to be a mind-independent truth?
the self-referential trap. Okay, walk me through the two possibilities here.
Option 1, the first writer says, yes, the statement, humans cannot access mind-independent truth, is itself a mind-independent truth. Then the statement immediately refutes itself. It claims to be an example of the very thing it says is impossible to access. The second writer calls this self-immolating hypocrisy. The argument dies by its own logic.
Okay, that seems problematic. What's option 2?
Option 2. The first writer says, no, this statement is not a mind-independent truth. It's just a mind-dependent truth, a conclusion reached within my filtered system.
And the problem with that is,
if it's just a mind-dependent belief like, I feel cold, or this argument seems convincing to me, then it loses all its universal force. It becomes merely an autobiographical report about the first writer's own cognitive state. It's not a necessary logical conclusion that binds anyone else.
so the second writer can just say, well, that's nice for you, but my mind-dependent system reaches a different conclusion, and yours has no authority over mine.
Exactly. It reduces the first writer's central claim to just an opinion. It carries no logical weight beyond their own perspective. This dilemma, the statement is either self-refuting or merely subjective. It's presented as a fatal flaw, the dagger in the heart of the whole argument against accessible objective truth.
That's a clever piece of jujitsu. And what about the dismissal of inference? The first writer said we can't infer noumenal truths.
The second writer finds that pathetic and an affront to the entire history of science. They argue that inference is precisely how we discover truths about things we can't directly perceive.
Like black holes or quarks.
Exactly. We've never seen a quark.
Yeah.
We infer its existence because the model that includes quarks makes astonishingly accurate predictions about the behavior of particles we can observe in colliders. We infer black holes from gravitational lensing, from the orbits of stars around unseen massive objects.
And the success of these inferences
Is presented as powerful evidence that they're not just games we play in our heads. They are successfully pointing towards aspects of a mind-independent reality. When the Higgs boson was found exactly where the Standard Model inferred it should be, wasn't that inference connecting with objective truth? To deny this, the second writer implies, is willful blindness.
Okay, the counter-argument seems to be landing some solid philosophical punches. Now, what about the claim that mind-independent truth is useless? The second writer got pretty fiery about that.
Extremely passionate. This section is titled, The North Star, the Desperate Need for Objective Truth. It directly attacks the premise that the concept of mind-independent truth is useless,
Calling it
the most dangerous lie of them all, accusing it of leading inevitably to moral and intellectual bankruptcy, essentially nihilism where nothing really matters.
Wow. So far from useless, they see it as essential.
Absolutely foundational. Objective truth, for the second writer, isn't just useful. It's the single most important concept we have. It's the North Star that guides all honest inquiry. It's the ideal, the benchmark, against which we measure our own inevitable errors and biases. Without that external standard, how do we even know we're fallible?
And they connect this to practical areas, like science.
Yes, strongly. Science, they argue, runs on the belief that there is a real answer out there, independent of our theories. A scientist designs an experiment hoping to find that answer, fully accepting their hypothesis might be wrong. It's the possibility of being proven wrong by a stubborn, mind-independent reality that drives progress and enforces honesty.
Without that belief.
Science degenerates into dogma. People just defend their pet theories because there's no external court of appeal. It becomes about persuasion, not discovery.
And justice.
Same principle. A court of law fundamentally assumes that something actually happened in the past, independent of what anyone now believes or argues. The entire process, evidence, testimony, deliberation, is aimed, however imperfectly, at discovering that mind-independent truth about the event.
If you abandon that,
you get alternative facts. Truth becomes whatever the most powerful narrative dictates, an Orwellian nightmare as they put it. The concept of objective truth is presented as the bedrock of a functioning legal system.
And they didn't like the invisible dragon analogy either.
Dismissed it as a straw man, a deliberate caricature. They offer a different analogy. Two people lost in the desert. One sees water shimmering ahead. Is it a real, life-saving, mind-independent oasis, or a mind-dependent mirage, an illusion?
Suddenly, the concept of mind-independent truth seems pretty useful there.
It's literally life or death. Their entire communication, their survival, hinges on figuring out if their shared perception corresponds to an external reality. The concept isn't useless, is the only thing that matters in that moment. To call objective truth useless is framed as ultimate intellectual cowardice, giving up on the very thing that anchors us.
Okay, so the second writer vehemently rejects the idea that objective truth is useless. But how do they handle the first writer's proposed alternative? The redefined, mind-dependent, justified truth. Did they engage with that?
They engage with it by utterly rejecting it. This is the section, the rebellion of reality, rejecting the padded self.
Padded self.
Implying the first writer's view traps us within our own minds. The attack is on the conclusion. Only mind-dependent, inferentially justified truths are valid. The second writer says this isn't a redefinition of truth, it's an abandonment of truth. It's confusing the map with the territory, or maybe the trial evidence with the actual crime.
What's the main flaw they see in this redefinition?
A huge one. It makes it impossible to be genuinely mistaken. If truth is just whatever is coherent and justified by our current beliefs, then past beliefs that were coherent and justified at the time were true.
Like the Ptolemaic model of the universe with Earth at the center.
Exactly. Ptolemy's model was internally coherent. It made predictions, though complex ones, and it was the justified scientific belief for centuries. So by the first writer's definition, it was true back then. When Copernicus came along with a better model, truth didn't get corrected. It just changed.
That does seem odd. We usually think Copernicus was right and Ptolemy was wrong.
Precisely. The second writer argues we believe Copernicus was right because his model corresponds better to the actual mind-independent structure of the solar system. The very idea of scientific progress, of getting closer to the truth, depends on there being an objective external reality to get closer to. This redefinition, they claim, destroys progress and replaces it with just aimless shifting between different coherent belief systems.
And this leads into that really powerful emotional closing statement from the second writer, doesn't it? The refusal to accept this confinement.
Yes, the final emotional plea. It's raw and defiant. A refusal to accept that love is just a filter configuration, that stars are just screen patterns, that the search for justice and beauty is just a game inside our skulls.
It's framed as a moral choice, almost.
Very much so. The second writer calls the first argument the ultimate act of human arrogance, to make the entire universe subservient to the limits of the human mind. They call it a philosophy for the fearful, for those who can't handle a reality bigger than themselves.
And they choose.
They choose to side with the explorers, the scientists, the artists, to believe our senses are windows, however flawed, to believe reason can touch truths beyond our own making. They choose the terror and the glory of a mind-independent reality. They want to be a citizen of the universe, not the warden of a prison of one.
And the final line.
Calling the first argument a suicide note for the human spirit and refusing to sign it. It's incredibly forceful, a powerful ending to the counter-argument.
Wow. Okay, that was definitely a rebellion. Passionate, logical attacks, powerful analogies. It feels like the first writer's neat structure took some serious hits. But the debate isn't over. Round 3. The first writer returns. Calmly, apparently, ready to dismantle this rebellion. How do they even start after that onslaught?
Well, they start methodically. Go back to the beginning. The aim is to show that the passion was misplaced, built on misunderstanding and logical fallacies. First up, reestablishing the inescapable filter, tackling that initial attack on the concept of the filter.
Right, the semantics around filter versus interface.
The first writer calmly recaps their original syllogism. Access requires faculties, faculties filter, therefore access is filtered.
Yeah.
And then they address the terminology debate,
Calling it.
a trivial semantic game. The core functional point, they argue, remains untouched. The process of perception is not direct. Whether you call the intermediary process filtering, translating, interfacing, or detecting, it's still an intermediary process. The output, our experience, is different from the input, noumenal reality.
So even using the second writer's preferred terms concedes the point.
That's the argument. A translator produces a translation, not the original. An interface is a layer between user and system. By proposing these terms, the first writer claims, the counter-argument implicitly agrees that mediation occurs, essentially giving away the game while trying to score points on word choice.
What about the telescope analogy? That seemed pretty strong for the second writer.
The first writer turns it around. Yes, a telescope extends our perception. But how? It takes physical phenomena like light waves or even radio waves or X-rays, which are totally outside our natural senses, and it translates them into a format, usually a visual image, often false color, that our existing mind-dependent cognitive system can process.
So the telescope doesn't bypass the mind's filter, it just feeds processed data into it.
Exactly. We don't experience the radio waves as they are. We experience a visual representation constructed according to rules. The telescope, in this view, acts as a powerful pre-filter or translator, preparing data for our primary cognitive filter. So, rather than refuting the original premise, the telescope actually supports it by showing how even our tools work by translation and processing for our minds.
Okay, that's a clever rebuttal. And the charge that the first argument claimed reality is an illusion.
Labeled a grotesque straw man fallacy, the first writer insists they never claim the external world isn't real, or that our senses constantly deceive us. The claim was that our perception is a construction, not a direct apprehension.
A reliable construction, though.
Incredibly reliable and useful, they reiterate. It has to be, for survival. Our phenomenal world correlates consistently with the underlying noumenal reality. But, and this is the crucial distinction, they keep hammering, a successful correlation is not an identity.
The weather map isn't the hurricane itself.
Precisely. The second writer, they claim, attacked a simplistic, childish solipsism that was never part of the original, more nuanced argument about constructed phenomenal reality.
Okay, point conceded on the straw man, perhaps. But what about that self-referential bomb? Is your statement itself a mind-independent truth? Question? That seems like a real killer. How's that diffused?
This is diffusing the self-referential bomb. The first writer calmly restates their second argument. Mind-independent truth is defined by independence. We can't access independence, therefore we can't access mind-independent truth. Then they give the direct answer to the gotcha question.
Which is?
No, the statement, humans cannot access mind-independent truth, is not presented as a mind-independent truth.
Okay, so what kind of truth is it then? If it's not objective, isn't it just an opinion, like the second writer claimed?
Not according to the first writer. They explain it's a logical conclusion derived from premises established within a mind-dependent system of reasoning. It's a statement about the limits of our cognitive system, made from within that system.
Can you give the analogy they use, the computer one?
Yes. Imagine a computer running a self-diagnostic. It checks its own systems, its permissions, its hardware interfaces, and then it prints a message. Error. This program cannot directly access the hardware's core voltage.
Right.
Is that message self-contradictory? Does the program need to access the core voltage to know it can't access it?
No, it figures it out from its internal knowledge of its own limitations.
Exactly. The first writer argues their conclusion is like that diagnostic report. It's a system-level logical truth derived from analyzing the nature of our cognitive faculties, our premises. It's a finding about the boundaries of our phenomenal logical world.
So the second writer's demand that it be either noumenal truth or mere opinion was a false dichotomy.
That's the claim, a clumsy failure to see the third option.
Right.
A truth derived logically within and about the limits of the system itself.
Okay, and scientific inference, like quarks, still just part of the map.
Still part of the map. Inference, they reemphasize, is the epitome of a mind-dependent process. It uses logic, models, concepts, all tools within our cognitive system. Quark isn't a noumenal thing we've captured. It's a concept within an incredibly successful human-created model.
Its success gives it validity.
Immense validity within our phenomenal reality, absolutely. It helps us predict and explain things wonderfully, but it remains part of the model, part of the map, not the territory itself. The second writer, they argue, keeps making that same fundamental category error, confusing the successful representation with the inaccessible thing being represented.
Okay, the defense seems quite technical and consistent there. But what about the emotional core of the counter-argument? That calling objective truth useless is dangerous, nihilistic, morally bankrupt. How do they counter pure passion and fear of consequences?
By calmly identifying the logical fallacy, this is the response to the uselessness of a broken compass. The first writer recaps their pragmatic argument. Usefulness requires access. Mind-independent truth lacks access. Therefore, it's useless to us.
And the reaction?
The passionate outcry about nihilism and danger is immediately diagnosed as a textbook example of the appeal to consequences fallacy.
Meaning?
Meaning, the second writer isn't actually refuting the logic of the argument. They're just saying, I don't like the implications of your conclusion for science, for justice, for meaning. Therefore, your conclusion must be false.
Which isn't logically sound.
Correct. The first writer essentially says, whether the implications are palatable or not is irrelevant to whether the conclusion follows from the premises. Complaining about the destination doesn't make the mapping correct. They call it not an argument, it is a tantrum.
Harsh. So how do they reframe the North Star idea, if objective truth isn't it?
They argue the concept of mind-independent truth is like a theoretical North Star located in another dimension. You can talk about it, but you can't actually see it or use it to navigate here. It's a broken compass.
So what's the working compass?
The original argument, they claim, provides one. The functioning North Star for guiding inquiry becomes the set of criteria for valid mind-dependent truth. Logical coherence, consistency with all available evidence, intersubjective verification, and predictive power.
And this works for science and justice.
They argue it provides a more rigorous standard. For science, the goal is constantly improving the coherence and predictive power of our models based on actual evidence. For justice, it's about constructing the most coherent narrative that counts for all the shared, verifiable, phenomenal evidence, testimony, DNA, etc. You defeat alternative facts, not by appealing to some unknowable real truth, but by rigorously demanding justification and coherence within the shared system of evidence and reason.
And they turn the danger argument around.
Yes, they claim that positing an unreachable real truth is actually the truly dangerous position. Why? Because it allows anyone, a demagogue, a cult leader, to claim special, private access to that unknowable truth, overriding all public evidence and reason.
Whereas the mind-dependent framework
Demands that all truth claims be publicly justified, testable, and coherent within the shared arena of human reason and perception. This, they argue, is the only real defense against tyranny, not a path towards it.
Okay, one last piece. That incredibly passionate final plea from the second writer, the rejection of the padded cell, the choice for the citizen of the universe. How does the first writer respond to that raw emotion and defiance?
With what might be seen as cool analytical dismantling, this is the arrogance of the self-proclaimed God. They start by reaffirming their conclusion. Only mind-dependent justified truths are valid for us.
And the Ptolemy versus Copernicus point, that the new definition makes mistakes impossible.
They call this a final, fatal misunderstanding of the argument. It's not that any belief system that feels justified is true. It's that validity is a measure of the quality of the justification. Its coherence, its parsimony, its predictive power, its fit with all available evidence.
So Copernicus wasn't just a change in fashion.
Not at all. The Copernican model represented a quantum leap in validity. It was simpler, vastly more predictive, and integrated new telescopic observations that the Ptolemaic model couldn't handle easily. It was a better justified model according to the very criteria proposed. Progress isn't abolished. It's redefined as the ongoing striving for models of ever higher coherence and predictive power within our phenomenal world.
Okay, so progress is still possible, just defined differently. Now, the arrogance charge.
This is where the first writer really turns the tables. They call the second writer's emotional plea, calling the first argument arrogant, a breathtaking, laughable inversion of reality. They ask, what is true arrogance?
Option A.
Option A. The epistemic humility to acknowledge our inherent biological and cognitive limits and to commit to working rigorously within those limits, building the best possible justified knowledge we can.
Option B.
Option B. The monumental godlike hubris to believe that the human brain, this evolved organ, has the magical ability to directly grasp the raw, unfiltered, infinite structure of reality in itself, transcending its own nature.
And the second writer's passionate plea is,
A passionate defensive B, according to the first writer. A desperate demand that we believe ourselves to be gods. They label it a philosophy of pure arrogance, dressed in the borrowed clothes of common sense.
well, the first writer's view is framed as,
Radical humility, an honest assessment of what we are. Finite beings making sense of an infinite reality through a finite set of tools.
so the final dismissal of the counterargument is,
That it wasn't really a defense of truth, but a defense of a comfortable illusion, a panicked flight from reason into the warm embrace of wishful thinking. Analyzed logically, they conclude, the passionate refutation collapses into an illogical emotional outburst signifying nothing, and the original argument, they claim, stands untouched.
wow, okay, what an intense journey that was. We went through the initial argument, this intricate case for, well, for reality filtered by our minds, making objective truth inaccessible and maybe even useless. Then the passionate rebellion, the counterattacks, and finally this calm, methodical dismantling of those counters.
It really covers a lot of philosophical ground, very densely argued on both sides, or rather all three stages.
Definitely. We've tried to unpack it clearly, focusing on the logic, the analogies, the core disagreements. It's fascinating how the first writer builds that case for the perceptual veil and redefines truth as this pragmatic, justifiable, mind-dependent thing.
And equally fascinating to see the force of the counterarguments rooted in common sense, scientific practice, and, well, a kind of existential need for objective reality.
Absolutely. And hopefully this deep dive wasn't just, an abstract philosophical exercise for you listening. It really does challenge how you might think about knowledge, about science, justice, even just everyday conversations. It really forces you to ask, when I say something is true, what do I actually mean by that?
It certainly pushes you to examine your assumptions. And perhaps it leaves us with a final thought to chew on. If valid truth for us is ultimately about robust justification, coherence, and predictive power within our shared phenomenal world, what does that imply about our responsibilities, especially now, in an age overflowing with information but not always with justification? What becomes our core duty as knowledge seekers navigating that?
That is a really powerful question to reflect on. What is our responsibility in building and verifying that shared, justified truth? Well, we hope this deep dive gave you a clearer map of this complex debate and maybe spark some further thoughts. Keep asking those big questions. Keep diving deep. Until next time.